What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again talking college basketball. It is Sunday, March the 16th, Selection Sunday, Champ Sunday, whatever you want to call it. An amazing day in college hoops. But before we get to Selection Sunday, we have 5 conferences that still need to decide who is the auto bid. And a few of these matter a lot, especially up the top with like your Ivy Leagues, your Americans, your A10s, some elite games today. Before we get started, the channel's experienced a lot of growth over the last 2 weeks, last couple days even. I think just more eyes on college basketball. But I appreciate anyone who's left a like, subscribed, left a comment with feedback. It helps a lot for a very small channel that's not even to 1,000 subs yet. If you've done any of those things, thank you very much. And if you're looking for a way to support for free, that's not very much time or effort, those things help a ton. Thank you if you've done any of that. It really means a lot to me. Let's dive right in. As is tradition, the Ivy League. They're tipping off at 11 Eastern time, 10 Central. It's a beautiful thing. Early on Sunday morning, you can't even leave the house. You just got to stay home and watch the Ivy League first thing when you wake up. It's amazing. And we have Cornell taking on Yale. It's a 5.5-point spread. This is a fast-paced game, so the total it's up at 159 right now, 160 in some places. This is an incredible game. No major injuries. Yale just beat Princeton yesterday in a little bit of a grinder, 59-57. It was the Ivy semifinal. That game was a lot wider through most of it. Princeton crawled their way back at the very end of the game. Meanwhile, Cornell beat Dartmouth 87-71 in a game that was not particularly close. In the regular season, Yale won both matchups. They took the first game 103-88, and then they won the second game 92-88. They shot the ball well in both games, especially from three. Yale dominated inside in the first game, in particular, scoring-wise. Rebounding was pretty close. They only out-rebounded Cornell 33-29. In the second game, Yale still scored inside at a more effective rate than Cornell, but Cornell actually took back the rebounding edge. It was 42-36 in that game. The peripheral stats, steals, fouls, close in both. As far as resumes, Cornell went 4-6 against the top 200. Their best wins are against Cal and Samford, two decent teams for an Ivy League to knock off. They have some bad losses, though. They dropped games to 259 Siena, 255 Harvard. A couple bad losses to pair with those solid wins. On the other side, Yale is 7-4 against the top 200. Their best win came over Akron, who's 99th in power ratings. They just won the MAC and will represent that conference for March Madness. They also played Purdue and Minnesota to single digits, so it's a pretty good body of work for Yale overall on the top end. They do have some losses that are concerning. They dropped games to Delaware at 232 and Harvard as well at 255. Yale is 264th in effective height. Cornell is 251st. The big difference here is Yale is 11th in rebounding. Cornell is 227th. However, you had these teams split the rebounding edge in both of the games. Yale took the first one. Cornell took the second one. I would still give this to Yale based on the body of work they've put on the court throughout the Ivy League, but I think it might be closer than some of those hype numbers indicate. And it's just a different Yale team than last year. We talked about this yesterday before Yale played Princeton, and we lost the Yale bet. But this team does not have Danny Wolf, who was their 7-foot center last year. It's a different team overall for Yale. They're going to struggle against the bigger teams in the tournament if they win this game and make it. Poulikitis and Bong, these players are very good, and some of their shooters can certainly shoot over the top of teams, but you just lost the elite post presence that's almost impossible to replicate in a conference like the Ivy League. As far as the shooting stats, Yale is still very good. 51st in effective field goal percentage, 19th from three. They don't take a lot of threes. They're basically reliant on John Poulikitis out there. 39% of his threes are going in, but they're 336 in three-point rate. You need to get to the rim if you're Yale. I guess, fortunately, Cornell is 259th in total defense, 249th inside, 212th in the perimeter. They're just giving up points everywhere. But with Cornell, they can definitely shoot with you. This is a team that's tied for number 1 in the country in effective field goal percentage. They can light it up. Second in interior scoring, 26 from three. They shoot the 13th most threes in the country. Nazir Williams, Guy Ragland, and Cooper Neward are all hitting at least 39% of their threes. Yale is the better defense by far, but they do lag from the perimeter. They're 26 inside, 155th from three. So you can certainly shoot over the top of this team. And it led to some close outcomes this year, especially the second game they played. There was only a 4-point margin of victory for Yale. We make this mathematically just barely inside the 5.5. It's close. So if you force me to take a side, I would be leaning Cornell with their shooting in the betting markets over Yale. But this is not one I plan to take unless Yale takes some money throughout the morning, which very well could happen. We're recording this very early on a Sunday before the selection shows and the games today. Cornell will be the lean. And as you know by now, we are talking about gambling on the show. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right. SEC title. Tennessee takes on Florida. This game is a 5.5-point spread as well. The total here is 144.5. No major injuries in this game. Alexis has been out for Florida. Not that that matters a ton. Tennessee, to get here, they knocked off Texas, a red-hot Texas, by 11 points. And then yesterday, they knocked off Auburn by 5 points. Florida, meanwhile, beat Missouri, crushed them, 14-point win. And then they just knocked off Alabama in a pretty convincing win, where Alabama ended up with some injuries in the game. They lost Grant Nelson, but still a 22-point victory over the Crimson Tide. Sears was limping around too. I'm not going to put an asterisk on the game. It was a very good win for Florida. Anytime you score 100 points, it kind of just is what it is. These teams split the regular season, and it was very weird. 2 blowouts on either side, but 2 weird lackluster performances as well. Florida won the first game 73-43. Tennessee was at full strength that game, and just horrific shooting. Tennessee shot 30% from the interior and 14% from 3. They got annihilated on the glass. Florida had 56 rebounds to Tennessee's 37. Insane game. Tennessee was at full strength. And the weird thing about it is Tennessee took the second game without their 2 best players, Igor Milicic and Zakai Ziegler. And I mean, I remember this game vividly. The news breaks that Milicic and Ziegler were not going to play. I was already holding a Florida ticket, basically just doubled down on it to get the money in good before the line moved. It moved a ton. And then Florida scored 44 points and lost 64-44. In that game, Florida did improve. I mean, I guess I should say Tennessee did improve their shooting, but it was still a pretty rough game shooting-wise for both teams, and especially Florida. They shot 35% from 2 and 15% from 3. Tennessee got them back on the glass. It was very close, though, 40-37 in terms of rebounds. Florida had 13 turnovers. Tennessee had 7. Just a greasy game. And both games kind of were. Florida played a greasy one, and then Tennessee played a greasy one in the first one. These teams are awesome on defense. More on that in a second. It just will happen sometimes when you're dealing with defenses this good. The only other nuance, Hand-Lockton did not play in either game. He's back now. Tennessee is 7-5 against the top 25. Wins over Louisville, Illinois, Florida, Missouri, Texas A&M, Auburn, Alabama. It's an incredible body of work. Only one loss outside the top 25 came in conference to number 49, Vanderbilt, by 1 point. But Florida has an awesome body of work too. 7-3 against the top 25. Wins over Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, Missouri, to name a few. Their losses are all elite too. Their worst losses to 34, Georgia. Incredible body of work for both games. This is the best game of the day just from a pure talent perspective. As far as the stylistics, both teams are tall. Florida is kind of unique in what they can do now, and their effective height number at 36, I don't think actually – it's a good number because you're generally playing 2 bigs. They've played 3, honestly, a little more recently, which is weird. But the effective height number, it takes into account the minutes you play. It doesn't take into account your depth. So they have Micah Hand-Lockton at 7'1", Alex Condon at 6'11", Ruben Chenyulu at 6'10", Thomas Haw at 6'9". So, yeah, they typically are still playing the 3 guards with Clayton, Martin, Richard. But the reason their effective height numbers come in a little behind some other teams like a Michigan or something is because they're just rotating these 4 for 2 on the floor, 2 off the floor. And we saw that yesterday. They were in foul trouble early, but it's like, okay, Hand-Lockton picks up 2 early. All right, let's bring in Chenyulu. He picks up 2. All right, right back to Condon. The depth is what's key here. But Tennessee's not short either. They're 51st in effective height. Both these teams are actually top 20 in rebounding, so great units on both sides. I just give Florida the slight edge because of depth, whereas Tennessee's not quite as deep on the interior. As far as shooting goes, Florida's a little better here. 38th in effective field goal, 23rd from 2, 92nd from 3. And they're pretty balanced, basically, of Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, and Will Richard shooting between 35 and 37% from 3. The problem is Tennessee's number 1 in three-point defense, and they're still strong at defending the interior, the 29th. And we saw that play out, especially in the second game. A team even that's pretty good at shooting and effective with the ball is going to run into problems against Tennessee. This is one of the best defenses in the entire country. But it's not going to be easier for Tennessee, who lives a little more dangerously than Florida offensively. They're 85th in effective field goal, 69th from 2, 160th from 3. And that three-point percentage is only bolstered by Chaz Lanier. He hits 40% of his threes. No one else is higher than 32%. Ziegler can't shoot. Milicic can't shoot. Not effectively, at least. And you're running into a pretty tough defense as well. Florida's top 13 in every major metric, 13th in total defense, 10th on the interior, 7th from 3. And that's how you get some of these weird performances where it seems like these teams are underachieving shooting the ball. But I think that's not giving credit enough to the defense on both of these teams, which leads me to an under in this contest. When you look at pacing in the game, it projects to be about average, but that is because Tennessee's super slow at 338th. Florida is at 65th. They're fast. Generally speaking, the slower team has an easier time dictating pace. That did happen in the first two games, and that doesn't even factor in the potential regression we see from these teams facing elite defenses on the other side. We played an under 144.5, a number I think that's completely fine in this contest. We make this closer to a 143. We'll take this one to the window and live with the results. Atlantic 10 Conference. George Mason takes on VCU for the title. It's an 8-point spread in favor of VCU, a 127.5 total. No major injuries in this game. To get here, VCU beat St. Bonaventure and Loyola. Both of those wins pretty convincing. The Loyola win was 62-55, so a little closer than maybe expected. And then for George Mason, they beat George Washington and St. Joseph's. Also two pretty good convincing wins to get here. As far as the head-to-head, VCU won the first game between these teams. They only played once this season, but convincing when it was 70-54. And it was kind of just a very good performance overall. They outshot George Mason. The rebounding was close. It was 37-36, but VCU had the edge there. Forced 14 turnovers and 23 fouls, so just an overall solid body of work in that game. As far as the resumes, it's a little better for VCU. They're 17-5 against the top 200. Best win against Colorado State, which that's aged really well. They just won their conference tournament. Also beat St. Joe's and Dayton. Excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat. For losses with George Mason, they only have for losses with VCU, let's not get ahead of ourselves. That cough really threw me off. They have 3 losses outside the top 100. The worst one came to Seton in overtime. That's his sub-200 loss. Otherwise, their worst one is to St. Louis at 106. So pretty good body of work. They just have the one blip on the radar. For George Mason, they are 15-7 against the top 200. Best wins against Dayton at 73, and then they beat St. Joe's twice. So they don't have the same high end as VCU, but pretty good overall. 4 losses outside the top 100 for them. They have 2 questionable losses to Central Michigan at 199 and East Carolina at 176. But this is a George Mason team I think that might come in a little underrated. They have a lot of high major transfers. You look at like Dante Maddox coming in from, I believe, Virginia Tech for him. But it's not just him. Katie Johnson came over from Auburn. Woody Newton's a big transfer who came down to this program. They're very talented. They just lag behind a little bit in some areas, especially shooting the ball. But anyway, effective height is pretty close for these teams. George Mason's at 116, VCU 42nd. But both of these teams, elite rebounders, 32 and 34 overall. That was an even matchup in the first game. Only 1 rebound separated them. For shooting stuff, George Mason is 132nd, VCU's 99th. So close, but favors VCU. As far as the actual stylistics, George Mason 155 on the interior scoring. They're also 138th from 3. They have a very low three-point rate, and they rely on getting to the rim. That's going to be tough against VCU, who's number 5 in the country in effective defense inside. They're 24th overall and 15th from 3, so they truly do not have a weakness. But the strength is their interior defense, which is a tough matchup here. On the other side, we mentioned VCU 99th in effective field goal. They're good at scoring inside, 63rd, 184th in three-point percentage. And they shoot a lot of threes, so this is dangerous living for them. They're 29th in three-point rate, and they're reliant on Max Shulga, who hits 39% of his threes. Philip Russell's been decent at 36%, but they're not getting a lot else on the periphery from these other players that are shooting threes. It's basically live and die by Shulga, and he's awesome, so it helps. But you run into volatility sometimes with VCU. And it's not like they're facing an easy defense either. George Mason's best asset on their team is their defense, 18th overall, 6th inside, 25th in three-point defense. Another team that's extremely balanced as both these teams are. And both teams force a lot of turnovers. The only real problem here is that George Mason turns it over a lot more offensively than VCU. So turnover margin does favor VCU quite a bit. Foul margin favors George Mason, so they kind of get it back. But when I'm looking at this game, these teams are fairly evenly matched in most efficiency metrics. It largely is just the turnovers committed that drives VCU all the way down to 201st in offensive efficiency. The shooting stuff is not that wide. Does favor VCU, but not that much. Defense is extremely close. Rebounding extremely close. Pace is horrible in this game. We shouldn't say horrible. Slow games aren't horrible. They're just slow. Maybe they're not as exciting. That's my personal opinion, but that is just that. Maybe people love slow games and love good defense. That's exactly what you get here. George Mason's 313th in pace. VCU is 236th. And it hasn't changed in conference. These teams are both slow. Defense is the best part of both teams. We're going to play George Mason plus an 8.5, not just on the value of the point, which should be noted because of the pace, but this team has played well. And honestly, they're comparable to VCU in a lot of metrics. So it's strength on strength for a lot of these in a slow game. We'll take George Mason plus the 8.5. Don't think they went outright, but a pretty good value against the spread. Next up, we have the American. UAB takes on Memphis, a 4.5-point spread in favor of Memphis, a 160 total. Some injuries in this game. Tyrese Hunter got hurt yesterday for Memphis. He was in a walking boot, and it doesn't appear like he's going to play. I don't know that for sure, but walking boots less than 24 hours before your next game, probably not the best. We'll see, though. UAB's Yaxel Lendenberg got a lot of treatment yesterday on the bench. He still played 36 minutes, so I'm not sure if he's limited. People were speculating this could be a toe injury. It was the first time all tournament he didn't play every single minute. So that's at least worth mentioning. I think there's a chance he's banged up in this game. I don't think he sits. Just want to highlight he was actually getting some treatment when he was out of the game yesterday. And to get here, UAB beat East Carolina and North Texas. That North Texas win is a great one of their better ones in the season. Memphis knocked off a red-hot Wichita State and Tulane to get here. Both of those games very close. We mentioned the Hunter injury certainly influenced it. But in the regular season, Memphis beat UAB both times. First one was a convincing win, 100-77. Second one was a little closer, 88-81, but that one was on the road. In the first game, they just crushed UAB shooting-wise, out-rebounded them 37-33. UAB did kind of right the ship a little bit in the second game, shooting-wise at least, but they were still out-rebounded 44-32, which is at least worth mentioning here because overall, the rebounding numbers would lead you to believe that UAB is a significantly better team on the glass. They're 19th overall. Memphis is 150th. And effective height, UAB is 132nd. Memphis is 179. What I'll say on that is Memphis can play big when they want to. They rarely use Dane Danger, who's 6'9", and Musa Cisse at 6'11" together, but they have at times. And it's usually when they play other teams that are large and can rebound. I wouldn't be surprised to see it here, especially with Hunter maybe not playing. You could see them go bigger. More on that in a little bit. All I want to really say is I don't think the gap is maybe as wide as the efficiency metrics would lead you to believe. Resumes, there's no real comparison. Memphis has the head-to-heads, obviously. They're 4-1 against the top 25, wins over Missouri, Michigan State, Clemson, Ole Miss. But with those highs come the lows. They lost to 91 Arkansas State, 171 Temple, and 135 Wichita. It's kind of what you get with the Penny Hardaway team. It's a little bit crazy how consistent he's been at being inconsistent. UAB has not played an opponent ranked higher than Memphis. They dropped both those games. UAB is 2-5 against the top 100. Their best win is against North Texas, and they have 6 losses outside the top 100. Their worst ones came outside the top 200 to Vermont and Longwood. Questionable body of work for UAB, and that's what you get when you have one good player. Yaxel Lendenberg is the player of the year in this conference. He's injured. He's playing through it. But, I mean, you just live so dangerously. This team can't shoot. They're 296 in three-point percentage. Lendenberg obviously gives them a ton around the rim, but I just don't know what this rotation is doing. Their best shooter, Tyron Moore, at 41% from three, and it's not a small sample, over 100 attempts. He played 6 minutes in their last game. Like, out of the players that actually play, Tony's the best shooter at 37% on the perimeter. So you just don't have any shooting out there. Even on the inside with Lendenberg, they're still 186th in 2-point percentage. Basically, to sum it up, you're not getting enough out of your rotational players. It is what it is. Memphis is 48th in total defense. They're not fantastic, 88th inside, 98th in the perimeter, but it's certainly good enough to slow UAB, especially if Lendenberg's banged up at all. On the Memphis side, Hunter does matter. He's a 39%. He's actually 40% three-point shooter. It's Haggerty at 37%. But Memphis can shoot the ball. They're 55th in effective field goal, 125th in 2-point percentage, 10th in 3-point percentage. They don't take a ton of threes, but when they do, they're hitting them. And let's just talk about this Hunter thing. He plays point guard, so his absence is key. What I think they're going to do is just move Haggerty to point guard. He's played it a little bit this year, and I don't really know what else you would do in a matchup like this. Basically, your options are, okay, we play Haggerty at point guard, a little out of position, or the other guy they've used at times is Baraka Okoji. I don't think they'll use him, but, sometimes you'll have to sub out. And even if it's not bringing Haggerty off the floor, maybe you just have to move your lineup around other ways. But the reason I think you use Haggerty at point guard is because then you can get PJ Carter on the floor, who's a 40% three-point shooter, on over 100 attempts as well. And he just gives you at least more proven commodities than what we've seen out of Baraka. So I think that's what they'll do. I don't have the right answer. But honestly, what that comes down to is I think now if you move Tyrese Hunter to PJ Carter and give him those minutes and you still have that shooting, maybe we're overrating this injury a little bit, especially with Yaxel being banged up on the other side. So where this leads me is to a Memphis minus a 4.5. It's just a lean right now because I want to see the actual injury statuses for both of these teams and get a good look at Yaxel and warm up, see how he's moving, and then know for sure if Hunter's out. We will likely make a play on this in Discord. All the games are early today, so this will come out, well before you're doing anything for the selection show. But on Discord, briefly, we're projecting every single game, sides, and totals. We also are doing player props for all the major games, and whatever they offer us, the books that is, on these mid-majors, we'll have props for every game today. Points, rebounds, assists, minutes, blocks, steals, everything you could possibly imagine. And we have a March Madness tool. Did a little demo on this channel, projecting every game ahead of time for the tournament. If you're interested in that, no long-term commitments. There's a week option for $10 and a month for $30. Come hang out if you'd like to, if that sounds good to you. It's something you can try for cheap for not very long. If you've supported, thank you. I appreciate you. The link is below. Big Ten Championship. Wisconsin takes on, Wisconsin takes on Michigan. This game has a 4-point spread in favor of the Badgers, 149 total. No major injuries. Sam Walters has been out for Michigan, but he's very deep in the rotation. To get here, Wisconsin beat Northwestern, UCLA, and Michigan State in a crazy back-and-forth game yesterday. What an awesome game. To get here, Michigan beat Purdue and Maryland. They had a double bye, and they played a crazy game yesterday as well. They came down to a buzzer-beater layup. Derek Queen's at the free throw line, ices Michigan. So it seems Trey Donaldson runs the length of the floor in 5 seconds, just a dead sprint, and gets off a layup where Derek Queen was actually a little out of place defensively, but crazy win for Michigan as people wrote them off at the end of the year. More on that in a second. In the regular season, Michigan did beat Wisconsin 67-64. That game was in the Kohl Center too. Both teams, bad shooting game, 24% from three or under, but Michigan was more efficient scoring at the rim. They won on the glass 43-42, and they only turned it over 12 times. That's key for this matchup. Resume-wise, Wisconsin's 4-4 against the top 25, beat Arizona, Purdue, and Michigan State, as well as Illinois. They only have 4 losses outside the top 25, the worst of which by a mile was in their season finale to Penn State. Michigan's 4-5 against the top 25 with wins over this Wisconsin team, Maryland, and Purdue twice. Their losses are a little worse, or at least I should say they have more of them. Drop games to 71 Wake Forest and 89 Minnesota mainly. But otherwise, Michigan is very tall. They have the 2 7-footers. Yale's Danny Wolf is over on Michigan now, but also Vlad Golden. So second in effective height, 30th in rebounding. Wisconsin's no slouch there, 38th in effective height, 64th on the glass. Both teams are strong. It was a fairly neutral matchup on the glass. Just Michigan was a little better at scoring at the rim compared to Wisconsin in the first game. But this Michigan shooting, man, you know what? Let's finish up on Michigan. They lost 3 of their last 4 games to end their regular season, and people were writing them off as just dead in the water. It seems that they didn't realize who they played, and those 3 losses they took were against top 25 teams. They lost 4 of their last 6 games in the regular season, all top 25 teams. The real concern was their margin of victory in their wins against Rutgers and Nebraska, but instead people would just point to the losses in what was lazy analysis. But this team had a good body of work coming in. It's just it hadn't been of late. They've sort of righted that ship to get to this point, and now you end up with an excellent Big Ten championship game. But part of their struggles in those losses comes from their shooting, and this team, they were shooting the ball pretty well early in the year. Before that losing streak, we were giving Damari Burnett and Trey Donaldson their flowers, and they still have good three-point shooting percentages. Both are at least at 39%. Really, the issue has been Danny Wolf taking too many threes, and he initially was up around 40%, but experienced some negative regression, and overall that has led to ebbs and flows in Michigan's shooting percentage. Yesterday they shot it fairly well. Early in the season they shot it well. From January onward, it's dropped below the top 200. It sits at 189th overall right now, and I'm not sure what performance you get. It's just been streaky. It is what it is. Wisconsin's defense does lag in perimeter defense. This is the 33rd overall unit, but they're 128th defending the 3. If you beat them, the best way to do so is shooting over the top. Michigan has options. They don't need to rely on Burnett and Donaldson hitting threes because Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf create unique mismatches inside. But it's always nice when those guys draw extra attention to be able to shoot over the top. For Wisconsin, they're 52nd in effective field goal percentage, 37th in scoring inside, and 77th scoring from the perimeter. On the perimeter, they're extremely reliant on Tanjay. He's hitting 40% of his threes. And that's because John Blackwell and Max Klesman have really struggled. Klesman's at 29%. From the three-point line. I think he's playing hurt. Obviously, he missed the last 3 games of the regular season, so that's worth noting. But this is very, very poor shooting performance from Klesman this year. And it's a tough defense. Michigan's the better defense. 20th overall, 19th inside, 70th from 3. Nothing's going to come easy against them. And the big elephant in the room here is, what does Michigan do on offense? Are turnovers a factor? 329th in turnovers committed. This is a uniquely good matchup for them. You basically have 2 of these matchups in the conference, Illinois and Wisconsin. Those are the 2 teams that force the fewest turnovers in the league. Wisconsin's 329th at turnovers forced. And it wasn't a factor in the first game. 12 turnovers, it's a middling number if you were to compare them to the country, but sometimes Michigan's turning it over 18, 19, 20 times. Wisconsin, unless they have an outlier performance, just isn't doing that. They're not forcing turnovers. Again, them and Illinois, fewest turnovers forced in the entire conference. So we make this just inside the 4. It's a nearly efficient number, 77.1 to 73.2. Not one I plan to play unless some late money comes in, which you would hear about in Discord. That's where we play these games late before tip. Did so with Colorado State yesterday over Boise when they became a dog. We talked about that in the video, though. But it's Michigan or pass. We'll see where this line goes throughout the day. We will be back, I think, either tonight, late night, or early tomorrow morning with a bracket show. Then we will have a full betting preview for all of the tournament games. We'll definitely cover some of the Crown and the NIT as well. If there's things you want to see, please let me know. Always listening to feedback from you, especially this time of year. Otherwise, thank you for watching. We'll be back soon, and good luck.